through discussion. Participants share their opinion, where we have panelists also sharing their opinion. So the whole idea of this webinar is to actually gather evidence and also share evidence that we have with regards to the work we are doing. What are some of the evidence and what are some of the changes that we can do to change policies, or probably to change our way of life, where people with different diversity would also have a very good environment to stay, because we all have human rights, we all have rights, but what are some of the limitations? What are the implications of some of the policies and laws that we face as advocates, as victims, or as a society in general? So after the discussion last, we thought it wise to also look at the policies and laws. So today we are looking at the implication. But then before we look at the implications, we also need to know what are some of the laws, or what are some of the policies that guide us. So before I do that, I will be introducing my panelists, or our panelists for today. So first on the list, I have Michaela Jechi, or JT. Michaela is the co-director at the Drama Queens, a youth-led organization committed to changing minds and effecting change through artistic activism. And their core mandate includes centering her story in a world that seeks to erase them. Michaela is also particularly passionate about creating and curating safe space within which all people, especially those at the intersections of gender, class, disability, can exist, access, and then resources that are available to express themselves. So that is what Michaela does. So that is our first panelist for today. Then we also have Abena Beniwa Fosu. Abena Beniwa Fosu is the executive director for Yebetumi Initiative. Yebetumi Initiative is also a women-led organization in Ghana, who are also making a lot of changes in our environment. She's a feminist. She's a menstrual health and media development professional with over 10 years of experience working in gender justice, specifically women and girls' sexual and reproductive health and rights, and socioeconomic and political meaningful inclusion. Beniwa is also passionate about helping young girls, women, to achieve a world where girls of all diversity live in dignity and are able to exercise their rights and realize their fullest potential. Third on the list, we have myself. I consider myself to be a human rights activist, also a drug policy reform advocate. I equally champion as a communication specialist. I'm as well a graphic designer, and I'm also passionate about creativity and innovation. So in a short term, I consider myself a jack of all trades, a master of many. While in terms of creating impact in other people's life, I am committed to improving my professional skills, which will definitely impact other people. I've also served as a leader, student leader, and volunteer in numerous student clubs and societies throughout my educational journey. The fourth person, we have Prince Bu Lucini. He has an engagement in Liberia currently, and due to the internet connectivity, we might not be able to have him. But then if we have him, we will just let you know, and then he will also share his opinion, or probably share his comments whilst we continue with our webinar. So just to check up on participants, are we all okay? Are we good to go, so that we just start with the presentation that I have? Can I hear hi to confirm if we are all here? This is a virtual space, so we definitely have to hear from you to know that, yes, I'm talking to someone.
Hey.
All right, thank you. Okay, okay, okay. So on the agenda today, we have our able panelists who will be helping us through the conversation. But then before we dive into the topic for discussion today, we would have to look at what we call the fact sheet. Now, before we are able to talk about something as advocates, we needed to know what are some of the existing laws, because even though we are governed by treaties, by the UN, by the AU, by the ECOWAS, the laws differs in each country that we go. So for today's topic, we are looking at the laws. So for the project, we are promoting human rights and inclusion, as I mentioned, of people who use drugs, sex workers, and then LGBTQI community. Now, for this particular webinar, which is the second one, we are assessing laws and policies in the West Africa region. So firstly, we would start with the people who use drug community. Let's look at some of the laws or some of the policies that guide us and how we'll be and their implications and how we can be able to include or probably, I mean, decision making is something that is very tough when you come to West Africa, or probably when you come to our work that we do. So we'll look at that as well. So now the overview of drug policy in West Africa. I mean, despite the significant progress, there are still gaps or there are still challenges. I mean, there has been advances when it comes to drug laws in most West African states, but then there are other countries or probably nations that we find within the West African region that there are a lot of punitive laws and over dependent on enforcement. So that is basically the overview of drug law in West Africa. Now the trend, there is this document that we have on our website, which was in collaboration with WADP, and now the West Africa Commission on Drug had this document, not just in transit. Now, even though not just in transit has been published a long time ago, the trend is not different from what has already been said. Now, there is a growing evidence of increased trade and consumption of wide range of psychoactive substances, drugs, which currently in Liberia, Sierra Leone is Kush. So if you have time, you can log on to our website, www.wadpn.org, and then check on the resources and have a read. Now, there's also a growing evidence of government involvement. For instance, when we date back to Mali, there's an evidence that I will be showing. There's evidence of government involvement in the drug trade. Niger, Mali, Sierra Leone, Ghana, Liberia, etc. Now, as I mentioned, evidence of Kush and Tramadol, especially in Sierra Leone and Liberia, is also something that is on the trend. Now, when we are looking at drug policies, they are highly punitive and enforcement-led. Drug laws in most West African countries, if not all, are highly punitive and enforcement reliant. If we say enforcement reliant, what we mean is that we invest more in enforcement rather than investing in harm reduction, where people who use drug or probably regulate drugs where drug traffickers would not have access to drugs. So that is what we meant by enforcement reliant. Now, criminalization. Most West African countries criminalize drug use and possession and drug use equipment, which has made harm reduction practice impossible. When we talk about harm reduction is just a process or probably an alternative way of helping people who use drug to come out of drug use, understand them, where we also make provision of facilities where they can go there to get treatment and all those things. Now, criminalization in most West African countries is there. So these services are not provided in most West African countries. Now, sentencing has also been one of the major problems. The least term, or probably a few years back, is 10 to 15 years mandatory custody. So we also look at some of the progress that has been done. Now, in some cases also, there are death penalty. I mean, when we look at the case of Singapore, Singapore has a law, a sentencing mandatory, which is death penalty. Once you are caught with a possession of drug, you are being sentenced to death. So death penalty, they kill you. Now, talking about our work, there has been some kind of progress along the line, even though there are other countries that are still behind. There have been some kind of progress. One of the progress is increase in engagement. Gone were the days where it's hardly to actually have a conversation or probably engage law enforcement on the use of drug. But with most of us, our work, there is increased engagement. And then there has also been engagement between policy reform advocates and government authorities and various authorities in diverse forms. I mean, we have the space to do training, we have the space to do dialogue, there's an advocacy, and then also there are sometimes community town hall meetings that goes on. Secondly, there is also increase in understanding. Now we are able to do, from the engagement, we are able to preach what is supposed to be done. And we know definitely it's not everyone who would understand, but there's that kind of understanding and acceptance of the failure of the war on drugs, and it's being appreciated for evidence-based drug control response. Harm reduction is one, drug treatment and rehabilitation centers as a result of the engagement. Now, there has also been increase in collaboration. Now, there's a collaboration between government and non-governmental agencies. We sometimes see these like the UN AIDS. We have here in Ghana, sometimes the drug and the narcotic control board. There are engagement that they do, or workshop which involve non-governmental organizations, which is a good thing. Now, policy reform gains. With the progress that have been made so far, there are some countries in West Africa which have also made progress in terms of bringing policies and laws that would totally wipe away the punitive laws or harshly laws that exist. Ghana, for instance, has reformed their law, which is the at 10919, reducing prison terms for drug use. It used to be high, but now it's lower than before. It also allow a partial harm reduction program. Even though Ghana does not have a harm reduction facilities and center, it's kind of allow partial because we as advocates, we want more. So it's kind of partial. Now, Liberia has also reduced its custodial sentencing for drug use. It used to be 10 years, to 5 years to 10 years. It has been reduced to 18 or 6 months. I mean, and this does not apply to when you are being arrested, you go to jail for 6 months. Now, there's a process. This happens to repeated offenders. It provides, I mean, even though we do not kind of encourage people being sentenced to prison, there has kind of be a progress in that end. But we would want more. We would want more to be done, where people who use drug will not be sent to jail. Now, when we come to Sierra Leone has also made progress. They have also made progress in the drug policy, in the drug reform, with collaboration with the WADPN. There has been a progress, and they have also developed a drug master plan for the first time in the country history. I mean, emphasizing on proportional in sentencing, public health, and then for human right for people who use drugs. Moving to Gambia, Gambia has also made provision in terms of sentencing. They have also made provision for that. They have also expressed interest in harm reduction treatment and rehabilitation, but expressed concern over resources and facilities, which is mostly in more of the West African countries. Now, Senegal has a very good model. Senegal has a harm reduction treatment and rehabilitation centers. I mean, they have the facilities already. I mean, with the help of government. Even though it's drugs in there is illegal, but they in the case of Senegal, they have really progressed. And just to also mention that Ivory Coast also has made progress in that aspect. So most countries in the sub region have started some form of harm reduction program, even though they remain criminalized under their respective drug control laws. But then there are some kind of progress in there or policy reform gains. Now, talking about policy reform gains, there are some challenges that we as advocates we also face. Now we realize that most of these things are not government's priority. They rather invest in the enforcement to actually send people to prison rather than recognizing the challenges and addressing them as it has to be. And financial resources are also one of the key challenges that is being faced because there are no financial support. It's hard to actually get these harm reduction services in place. Now, governments in the South region are very skepticalism, like they are very skeptical with the effectiveness of alternative to criminalization. When the mention of decriminalization or when people mention decriminalization, a lot of people have their reservation. They turn against it, which is not a good thing. Now, law enforcement dealings. Now, as I mentioned, there are evidence of law enforcement dealings. And the involvement of law enforcement officials has really posed a very threat. It's actually a barrier to most of our work that we do. Now, in the next slide, we have some of the examples. I mean, some of the news items that have been reported, which involve drug enforcement. So it makes the drug policy reform advocacy very difficult. When there is progress, you realize that law enforcement are actually involved in most of the dealings, which is something that is very worrying. So these are examples of articles that were published in 2022. There has been a news where, I mean, fake Leons is smuggling into, I mean, Sierra Leone, in the case of Sierra Leone, in the case of Nigeria, even in the case of Ghana, we have a lot of cases as such in most of the regions. Now, the call to action, which we advocate would always want, is that we have to have evidence-based approach or evidence-based drug reform. We know that it's gaining grounds, but funding has been one of the challenge to actually advance on most of the progress that has been made. And that being said, we invite donors and partners to support in addressing the drug problems in the sub-region. So without much ado, I will pause here for us to take questions and comments from participants on what has been presented so far. This is the first phase on people who use drug. We'll move to the second phase, which has the sex workers, and then we'll also look at the LGBTQI community. So colleagues, the floor is open. Questions and comments on what has been presented so far. Okay, Joseph.
Um, morning, good afternoon. Thank
Joseph,
you.
your line is bad. If you
Center
can position yourself
for
well.
you. You mean I'm not audible, right?
No, there was a break in your speech.
Oh, okay. It's the network. Sorry, it's the network.
Yes, yes,
You
please.
know, Africa country, we are facing so many difficulties. Anyways, let me proceed. So, as I was saying, thank you very much for your wonderful contribution so far made in this particular meeting. So, not that I don't have much to say, but I would like to ask questions and then give suggestions.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible enough.
Okay, all right, okay. How can we achieve, the mitigation of drugs use in West Africa?
Okay, that's a
That's
very
one.
nice question. Okay, so I will note
Yeah. So
them down and
the
then
other
we'll
one,
answer.
okay, the other one here is stakeholders engagement. In as much as we are just coming up with this kind of idea or organization, we are faced with financial challenge or challenges. So, how can we access stakeholders, engagement? For instance, because our government are like presidents, youth ministers, or institutions, drugs institutions in our various countries, and then partnership in West Africa. We are in for instance, Sierra Leone collaborating or partnering with Nigeria or Ghana, So I really want us, to dive into that area and then try to seek remedy towards that. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you very much, Joseph. So your first question has to do with how can we mitigate the drug use or the drug situation in West Africa. Second has to do with financial assistance or probably financial help from other agencies. And then also the third one has to do with collaboration with countries or collaboration with authorities also. Okay, so your question is well noted. Colleagues, if anyone else, I saw a
Yeah.
hand up. So I'll take the questions and then we answer it. We have other colleagues who would also make contributions to most of the questions you are asking. I saw a hand up. Okay, Gladys, kindly unmute yourself. Hello, Gladys, you have the floor.
Can you hear
Okay.
me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Yes, please.
Okay. My name is Gladys from Nigeria. Good day, good morning, and good afternoon for the people in afternoon now, but good morning here in Nigeria.
Good morning.
Actually, my own worry about the issue of drug policy is the fact that evidence-based drug policy will stand to be inconclusive if any country find it difficult to push in drug use as a public health issue, which will give way to decriminalization. Because we can't talk about decriminalization when there's no national backup of public health. At our primary health care level, do we see anywhere that drug issue of intervention is being carried? I think this is one of the things that the countries of West Africa should look into and see how the Ministry of Health will see it as a priority, that a drug user is a patient just like a cancer patient or a diabetic patient. And I want to end my talk with a submission of Kofi Annan, as he then was. He said, I believe drug has killed many people, but wrong government policy have killed many more. So if we begin to go by policies that are not human, then we will find out that we'll be killing many more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gladys. That was a very powerful statement. Okay. I can't see any hand up. But then is there anyone who also have a comment or question before we answer Joseph's question?
Yes, please.
Okay, you have the floor.
Thank you. My name is Jonathan from Nigeria. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the presentation you've made. I'm very happy that some West African countries have made significant progress in terms of harm reduction programs and steps towards decriminalization of drug use. I think that one of the challenges we face when it comes to advocacy, one of the challenges we face convincing policymakers to have a positive view towards decriminalization is the fact that most times they confuse, or even most of us who make these interventions confuse decriminalization with legalization. I ask myself how that hurdle can be crossed. In a number of engagements that I've had with policymakers, stakeholders in the system here in Nigeria, I often find that people assume that decriminalization is the same thing as legalization. In other words, drug use is not a crime. And I think that is where that negative perception of our advocacy for the criminalization of drug use is viewed from. So I would want to see going forward that we have a concerted and united effort at changing that mindset, the opinion. I mean, effecting the correction. That's the first comment I wanted to make. The second is, somebody mentioned collaboration, and I wanted to also take it further. I know that sometimes advocacy efforts at effecting policy change have more better, positive results if there is an organizational push or interface with regional government. For instance, in Nigeria, I may be wrong, and I stand very much to be corrected. But I think most of the efforts at amending the national drug law in this country have been through the NDLEA itself. It is spearheaded by the NDLEA. And the NDLEA, as far as I know, is actually pushing for those amendments that make it almost impossible to defend people who use drugs in court. I am just coming from court as an example, and I went to represent somebody who was caught with 300 grams of cannabis. He's obviously a drug user. And in fact, in court, while he was in court, he was exhibiting symptoms that show that this person needs more of treatment than incarceration. But what did the NDLEA do? They would, in most cases, get these people to even plead guilty, so that it is almost impossible for you to even make a case for them to have alternative to incarceration. And it is this same NDLEA that is pushing for an amendment. And if you look at all the articles of amendment that they've made, I've had the opportunity of reviewing it in the past. They are even asking for stiffer penalties and making it impossible in some cases for you to even appeal. And one thing that I think is responsible for this is that we're not, I think that there's not that concerted effort, an organizational push showing that comparatively, other countries that have adopted decriminalization are doing better in terms of the results. I have done some work comparing results between countries like Czech Republic and Portugal and the Netherlands that have decriminalization policies with countries that maintain strict punishment, like Iran, for instance. And the results show that there is merit. Even if it is arguable on both sides, there is merit in decriminalization. But again, even if I have also presented an opinion paper through my organization, LAD, at some point in the past. But I would like to see more concerted efforts, united efforts, collaboration from regional bodies like WDPN, pushing regional governments at this level to have a positive mindset towards decriminalization. And I think that will go a long way. And like the last speaker said, the last contributor said, evidence-based results is what we can use to back up this push. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Jonathan. Thank you very much. We would have to answer the questions that Joseph asked. So to help me do that, I would call Prince if Prince is here. So Joseph's question, the collaboration issue has been dealt with. I think we would not try to tackle the financial aspect, financial challenges, because it has always been a major barrier, or probably something that we discuss in most of our engagement. So we would just, Prince would help me to answer the question. How can we mitigate drug problems in West Africa? Prince, if you can hear me, you have the floor.
Oh, thank you, Michael, for the opportunity. Of course, the previous last two speakers have, shed some light on some of the ways. We advocate for evidence-based drug laws. That is, like she said earlier, drug laws that would prefer alternatives to incarceration. Like the scenario that was given earlier. Why would you want to hold a user in prison rather than actually providing the services, the support services that they need to help them address their drug-related issues? Well, as an organization, West Africa Drug Policy Network and its members, we are also trying to push policy reforms, whether it's harmonization of drug control response at the regional level, that is at ECOWAS level, or also making sure that at national interventions, they have laws that will divert people from the criminal justice system, into a public health facility to address problematic drug use. We have made some efforts, in a number of West African countries. It's a bit challenging to actually have a total decriminalization. Like Jonathan mentioned, a lot of people misunderstand decriminalization for legalization. So decriminalization is actually ensuring that people are not criminalized, which means people are not taken through the justice system to determine what penalties should be meted on them because they use drugs. So if you use drug and then you are charged court and you are convicted as a criminal for using drugs. And that criminal record has a ripple effect on your post prison life. So nobody will want to employ you because they see you as a criminal. Society would have to frown on you because they see you as a criminal, and opportunities for employment, education, health will all dwindle because of that decision. We also have to take note that people who use drugs will need the drugs to use. Some people are criminalized for very small quantity of drugs. Some don't have any connection with drugs, but because drug was also found in their possession, they have to serve prison sentences. So those laws, like Jonathan said earlier, the NDEA or the drug law enforcement agencies make it a little bit difficult for diversion from the criminal justice system, diversion of offenders from the criminal justice system, and then also for the implementation of that law. So we as the network, we're trying, making sure that we engage at the regional level. We're also making sure that we engage at national level to reform laws. We have some results in Ghana. We have some results in Liberia. What do they look like? The results look like some provision for harm reduction, drug treatment and rehabilitation, counseling and reintegration, you understand? And reintegration. So we are making some progress. I think most countries in West Africa, as much as they have not reformed their laws, they have opened up to some level of harm reduction intervention. So there's, at some level, there are rehabilitations, medically assisted treatments going on, counseling, some reintegration, as much as drug use remain criminalized in these countries. But there's some form of pilot harm reduction and rehabilitation programs. But that is not enough. We also have to ensure that it is legislated. So we are pushing and making effort to ensure that these countries, it's a bit challenging, but we are doing as much as we can to ensure we get there.
Okay. Thank you very much, Prince, for that wonderful submission. So because we are behind time, we'll quickly move on to the next topic. So if you have any question or suggestion, you can kindly use the comment box or the comment section and then drop your comment, your questions or suggestions in there. So we have to move straight to the other topic. I have here with me Michaela and Abena to help me go through this topic. So the other community that we are looking at the LGBTQI community. Now, as I mentioned, before we jump into any discussion, we needed to know what are the status of this, the legal status of this in countries. I mean, the country varies, but we have to look at the legal status. So now we look at the LGBTQI community. I mean, the status of it in West Africa. I mean, research has found out that most African countries impose restrictive policies against the community, with a few offering basic protection. Penalties for gay sex generally include fines and prison term. Nigeria permits flogging, and a handful of countries allow death penalty though it's unclear whether any actually impose it, if they impose it. We hardly, there's no data on that, but I mean, there are countries, there are stories, or there are evidence that has been I mean, due to the capturing of media and then sharing it, we have seen some evidence as such. Now we jump to the legal punishment in West Africa. When you come to now the West African countries, we have 16 West African countries, including Mauritania. But when we talk about the ECOWAS, Mauritania is excluded. When you come to Mauritania, they use the death penalty. Nigeria also uses the death penalty. When you come to Sierra Leone and Gambia, they use the life in prison punishment. When you come to Ghana, or when you come to Senegal, Senegal has in prison sentence where you go to jail for 5 years. Ghana, with the recent bill, gives you 3 years. I mean, the bill itself has a lot of components that we can't look at it at this webinar alone. We would need legal practitioners who understand the law very much to actually guide us through it. But with what we have in our possession now, Ghana has 3 years as a prison sentence. Togo has 3 years. Liberia has 1 year. Guinea has 3 years. Now, when you come to other countries which have no penalty, we have Burkina Faso, Ivory Coast, Benin, Niger, Guinea-Bissau, and Cape Verde, which has no penalty as punishment. Our legal punishment in West Africa, I mean, if we are looking at West Africa, we also have to look at Africa as a continent. Now, punishment in other African countries like Uganda and Somalia is also death penalty. When you come to Sudan, Tanzania, and Zambia, it is also life in prison. When you come to Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, Libya, Ethiopia, and other countries, it's also prison sentence where the minimum is 2 years and the maximum is 15 years. While in Central Africa, Madagascar, DR Congo, Gabon, Congo Republic, they all attract penalty as a punishment. Now, when we look at the legal possibilities, okay, still on the legal punishment, and we realize that according to research, we have 32 out of 54 countries that have criminalized same-sex sexual activities, down from 39 as it existed in 1990. On the contrary, South Africa is one of the only 12 countries in the world, and the only one in Africa to explicitly protect LGBTQI people in its constitution. Its policies have also helped pressure, I mean, some of its neighbors according to research. Now, looking at that, where we are being guided by research, the legal possibilities in most of these countries, research has shown that legal possibilities in Ghana, Nigeria, the Gambia, Benin, and Liberia are impossible. At the same time, there is no data on the other West African countries for either its possibility or its nominal possibility. Now, most African governments still have harsher policies than those in regions outside Africa, and several have recently restricted the LGBTQI rights further. Now, looking at Ghana, for example, has passed a straight anti-gay bill last month, and in 2023, countries in Eastern Africa, such as Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, have all introduced or passed a more stringent legislation. Meanwhile, countries such as Egypt and Tunisia use vague laws against sex work, cybercrime, and debauchery to, I mean, what we call the surveillance, where they use surveillance to trap and then deem to be entrap those deemed to be LGBTQI community. Now, when we look at progress that has been made so far, I mean, in the past 10 years, 6 countries in Africa have legalized same-sex relationship in the past. I mean, as mentioned earlier on, we have different countries and their laws. I mean, as in many parts of the world, legal recognition is limited. It's very, very, very limited. And as I mentioned, only about half of the continent, I mean, bans these activities. So Angola in 2021 decriminalized same-sex. Botswana in 2019 also did same. Mozambique in 2015. Lesotho in 2010. Seychelles in 2016. Mauritius in 2023. Now, the implications of these laws are of a very high, how should I put it? I mean, they are actually against people who are identified as such. I mean, one of the implications of this anti-LGBTQI laws is physical violence. Now, long prison sentences, death penalty laws, in some cases, state violence force many Africans to live in fear, I mean, of their identity being exposed due to these anti-LGBTQI policies. I mean, also reinforce societal rifts. I mean, placing them at a higher risk of violent or hate crimes. Even in countries where homosexuality is decriminalized, I mean, such as Egypt, LGBTQI people face, I mean, state-sanctioned violence. I mean, the true extent of violence is difficult to actually ascertain, as experts believe in most instances. Secondly, is repression. I mean, this is actually a limit on freedom of expression. Sometimes most of the significant restraints on the community. Several countries have banned the LGBTI community organization. I mean, pride events, which are mostly celebrations that is being done across the world, are being banned. I mean, we often see police and raid by police, and even in some countries, law prohibits the LGBTQI rights groups from even registering. I mean, in Ghana, once the bill has been passed, it also bans organizations, or probably organizations that are LGBTQI led. They ban them from registration. The other thing is also discrimination. Even where some same-sex activities are legal, almost no African countries have laws in place to protect the LGBTQI population from discrimination, which is pervasive and in schools, workplace, healthcare facilities, and other social settings. Additionally, media outlets sometimes spread false information about the LGBTQI people, often due to reporters' own biases or political pressure in their operations. I mean, this information campaigned by politicians and other prominent figures. I mean, this calls for stigma, and then sometimes low literacy rates across the continent make it harder for people to actually seek accurate information. One of the implications also is on health. Now, on health, the community, especially men who have sex with men, are not disproportionately burdened with serious illness. I mean, they have illness such as HIV due to their status. They cannot actually declare their identity, so they mostly face illness, and they don't get health access. That is what I'm trying to say. They don't get access to health. I mean, studies have shown that, I mean, high prevalence of these diseases is at least in part linked to, I mean, homophobic laws, as fears of being identified, as I mentioned, for the community to prevent individuals from seeking medical attention. And I mean, mental illness such as anxiety, depression, and psychological trauma are often almost more common in the community. The other point is also political blowback. I mean, some attempts by Western governments. I mean, when these laws or these bills are being passed, you realize that Western governments, including the United States, I mean, find their way to actually issue sanctions or punish an African country for enacting anti-LGBTQI laws. I mean, it calls for it. There's a backfire for that. While in some, I mean, the LGBTI community may endorse the support. Others say it risks stoking further hatred and violence from the public. So this is the few data that we've gathered on the LGBTQI community. I would call on the panelists who are here, Abina and then Michaela, to help us. I mean, first, going through this data, the first question would be, what are some of the things that we can do as advocates to stop these harsh policies or laws? But before that, I would like to ask colleagues if you have any comments or questions, as we did for the first presentation. Anyone with a question or comment? Okay, I can see that there are some questions in the chat. Can we have references of structures that are clearly advancing on the RDR pilot projects to develop partnerships to draw inspiration to adapt? Okay, I think I get it because it's coming from a French-speaking country. Okay. Okay. So colleagues, the floor is open. Do we have any questions or comments with what has been presented so far? Before we dive into the panelist discussion with Abina and then Michaela. We also have the other topic that will be, the data that we'll also be looking at, the sex work. Okay, I have,
You guys,
yeah, Joseph's hand is up. Joseph, the floor is open.
thank you once more, my brother, for your brilliant presentations. You know, it was really brief, and then it makes a lot of senses. But come to think of it, LGBTQI,
Yeah.
is it biblically it is condemned? Yeah, biblically, yeah. But for from the human right perspective,
Yeah.
which says that um, a person right is to whatever thing that you want to do for yourself, you have the sole aim and power to go ahead with it. Yeah. So I don't know if legalizing LGBT in Africa, because we are not only limiting it to West Africa, but to West Africa as a whole.
Okay, Joseph, so
From your
the issue here
coming.
we are discussing, sorry to cut you. I will give you the chance for you to continue so that we will all be on the same page. We are looking at the implications of laws on the community. So it actually doesn't only limit it to legalization. We are looking at the health issues. We are looking at political blowbacks are something that it's everywhere. We are looking at the discrimination. We're also looking at the limit of freedoms on this community. So carry on, sir.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you. All right, so yeah, comes to as I was saying, political will for legalizing this right in our countries. Yeah. To me, um, I don't know. I just don't want to, discriminate or condemn them. But I do not see the necessity for such, it has a lot of implications, really. So,
Yeah.
but due to human rights, you know, they have been given what? Concessions or right to go ahead of whatever thing they want to do with themselves. So I have a lot to, to input here, but
Okay. Hello. Hello, Joseph. Okay, I think we lost Joseph. So if colleagues, if anyone also have a comment or questions, the floor is open before we dive into some questions or some some questions that are being asked every day or looking at the way forward. So we are still looking at inclusion. When it comes to the drug policy, when it comes to the sex work, and when it comes to the LGBTQI, there's this saying that nothing for us without us. So what are some of the ways before some of these laws are being passed? Just as we discussed the drug policy, there are a lot of limitations. There are a lot of factors that actually leads to other. So living away some of the things we know. I mean, that is why I mentioned that let's look at the health aspect. Let's look at some of the discrimination aspect of it. I mean, there has always, in my presentation, I mentioned that there has always been misinformation or disinformation out there. So sometimes when this issue is being mentioned, it is hard for people to actually have the conversation around it. So sometimes you see people end up, I mean, giving false information. So Ivy, I can see Ivy's hand is up. The floor is yours, please.
Hi. I just wanted to know where exactly Joseph's question or contribution was, because I think he was spiraling a bit. Like, is he saying that like queer issues do not like what exactly was he saying?
Okay, so I think he has his reservation, but I think he was making comments, but I think it wasn't clear as
Yeah.
to what exactly his stance were or what. So because of this conversation, I mean, we are looking at the way forward and not actually go back and forth with what has already been a misinformation. I mean, we are here to actually give the right information. No one is wrong, no one is right, but the right information is supposed to be put out there, not just use a hearsay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if the right information is being put out there, according to him, queer people have had right to do what they want to themselves. But
I think he mentioned something like that.
But in more than 30 African countries, being queer is illegal. So like where's the right? Where does the human rights and inclusion in this fall, according to what he's saying? I honestly want to know where he got his sources from and basically what he's saying. That's like, okay. I'll just wait for his presentation then. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you, Ivy, for your suggestion and your comment. I mean, the conversation is still ongoing. We have our panelists here. I think any colleague with a question or comment before we move to the other questions that would have to be asked. Okay, Abna, Michaela, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, okay. I hope that is Abna. Okay, that is Abna. So Michaela, can you also hear me?
Yes. You're still very audible. I can hear you.
Okay, okay. So I mean, diving straight to some of the questions. I mean, after this presentation, I mean, we need to actually work with facts. And then, as I presented, the community actually face a lot of backlash, and there are this disinformation, which people use as an assumption, perception. In a time where there are policies or laws that are being enacted to actually prevent most of the activities that would actually debunk this misconception, as advocates, what are some of, we know we are, with the passage of a bill or a law, it actually prevents us from operating. But as to disinformation, what are some of the best ways that we can carry out our message for the public to actually understand it and then being included in most of the discussion that goes on? I would want your opinion on that.
Which one of us do you want to start with?
Okay, yeah, Abna first. Sorry.
Okay, thank you, Michael, and thank you everyone for joining all this important discussion. I would start by saying it's really great that we are having spaces like this to have conversations like this, especially at a time when there is increased persecution, if I should put it that way, of LGBTQI people in our communities. There really isn't any nice way of going about this other than talking about the right of people to exist and in dignity, regardless of their sexuality or sexual orientation. As activists, our focus or our messaging, I believe, should be around the harmful. Let me just say that we should first of all be really educated on some of the issues that people who chastise queer people raise as their weapons of, I don't want to say distraction, but as their point of argument. We should be very educated on that, first of all. Like, people are saying it's not in our culture. Meanwhile, historically, it's been proven that queer people have existed in our societies even way before the onset of colonization, and they were accepted as, equally important members of society as heterosexual people. Trans people have existed. We have words like Kojobesia in Akan, showing that queer people really have been with us, and so the existence of their names in our language is an indication that they have been with us for ages, as opposed to the argument that this is a foreign import and Western countries are trying to force queerness on us. There are practices like the Agonwole Ajale in the Nzima language that described marriage between two people of the same sex. So queer people have been with us. People raise religion as, and the person who spoke earlier, forgotten his name, cited the fact that religiously it is wrong, but he thinks that they should still be able to exist. The argument shouldn't start from our religious beliefs. We forget that not everyone is religious, not everyone is a Christian. Your religious values don't determine how another person should live their lives. And even in religion, I used to be a Christian. I'm not a Christian, but I'm also really not a religious person anymore. But even in Christianity, because that's the religion I'm more familiar with, the Bible tells us to love everyone, including people we consider sinners. The Bible tells us to, I've forgotten the exact passage, but it talks about letting a farmer planting and, weed growing with the crop, and the fact that they should all be allowed to grow. And when it is harvesting season, the crops will be harvested and the weed will be cut down. So if our idea as Christians is that these people are sinners and we consider them the weed, it also tells us that it is not our place to weed people out by any means. And so we are not entitled in any way by our religion to discriminate against people and hate people to the extent that our hatred fuels their assault or violence against them. And of course, we talk about morals, and in our constitution, we talk about how, queerness and even prostitution, we'll get to prostitution, but, issues like this are captured under offenses against public morals. How do we classify somebody's very existence as something that's against public morals? What is public morals? I mean, how do we say this is morally right publicly to lynch somebody because of their sexuality, to sexually abuse somebody, as in the case of corrective rape, that you're sexually molesting somebody because of their sexuality? How is that moral if we are using morals as our gauge for approving or disapproving of people's very existence? There's an argument that, queer people are going to influence other people to be queer, and that they have a choice. They are deciding. Do you think that if I have a choice to choose my sexuality, do you think I would choose to date men who have been proven to be women's natural predators? By nature, men have, for centuries, for decades, proven that they are women's natural predators. Yet some of us are heterosexual, knowing very well how dangerous men are to the existence of women. Do you think I would choose to be interested in men? Some of these things go, and also for queer people who are constantly being abused, do you think that they would choose to be queer in the face of all of these persecutions, including, lynching? And so as advocates, I believe that these are the points we should start from. We should start talking about the nonsensical nature of these arguments that people raise. We should aim at educating instead of antagonizing. Sometimes you need to let people know the absurdity in their arguments. There are times when you would have to be harsh to let people know that they are being nonsensical in their reasoning. But ultimately it should stem from the point of education, because I think that is what is mainly lacking. There are people who are just homophobic regardless of what you say. They are, go on and on and on, expend energy and time trying to get them to understand the issues, and they will still just choose to be homophobic. But regardless of that, our advocacy, our education, our sensitization should first of all stem from tackling some of these ignorant reasonings around people's understanding or idea of why queer people shouldn't be in our community in the first place. And also we should learn to understand the people we are advocating for, the issues within the community we are advocating for. I was in a meeting that had some queer women present, and I was going on and on about, how queer relationships are perfect, women dating women are perfect. And, I had a queer woman explain to me how the romanticization of lesbian relationships, especially, is kind of preventing important discussions about some of the abuses or violence that happens in lesbian relationships, because we've over-romanticized them so much. We don't pay attention to the violence that happens in their relationships like it does in heterosexual relationships. So when we talk about sexual and gender-based violence, intimate partner abuse, our focus is on heterosexual relationships, forgetting that queer women are also human beings, and like every human relationship, there are conflicts and there are parties who are sometimes abusive. But because we've put this lovey-dovey tag on them, we are not concerned about some of the abuses that goes on in their relationships, and so we are not even discussing them publicly. And once these things are not being discussed, there's no room for redress, and so some of them suffer in silence. And so, yeah, I think I've gone on for too long. So,
I think you've actually touched on most of the questions that were going to be the follow-up questions. I mean, you've
Oh, I'm
spoken more
sorry.
about. Oh no, I mean that is it. We are here to actually have a very fruitful conversation. I mean, there are some of one of the major setbacks when these conversations are being raised is actually the misconception about the LGBTQI community. I mean, people do not really understand. I mean, getting close to understand exactly what is happening. There's always that kind of like the mind has already been made. So it is good for us to have this kind of conversations to be able to educate people on some of the things that they already know. So on learning some of the things that has already been taught or probably has been said, and then getting new knowledge on the topic when it's being mentioned. I mean, thank you very much for actually giving that a very detailed suggestion. So, Michaela, if you also have something to say.
Hi, yeah. So our question, like the main question is, what should advocates do?
Do
And
I mean you can also look at it from other aspects.
oh, I
Health.
will. I will. Like, even though I'm making the question, my answer doesn't even address it directly. I wanted to say
Okay.
first off,
All right.
since we're using the Ghanaian bill as like a basis, I'm going to
Yes,
like
please.
clarify that it hasn't. It's been passed by the parliament, but it hasn't been assented. And so
Stated by the
until it becomes
president.
assented by the president, it's no law yet. So then, whatever speculations or reach that the bill has is still just a bill and it doesn't hold effects just yet. However, this Ghanaian bill is one of the worst bills that Africa has. And whenever people bring this up, they say stuff like, oh, no, that's not true. Nigerian's bill has a 14-year term. And that is true, that is valid. But then it doesn't cancel the fact that the Ghanaian bill is very far reaching and it's so far reaching that if for instance it's just very far, it's so far reaching that it's mind blowing. It means that by basically being on this call, all of us on this call can be criminalized of a sort, right? So that's just one
Yes.
point I want to put out there. The second thing is when I think it was Bill that was speaking earlier said that there's a very big difference between decriminalization and legalization. And
Very true.
that was in reference to like the drug laws and all oppression is connected. So it was just like I was writing, I was writing because I was like, yes, that's so true. Because a lot of policies and a lot of African countries' stance on the bill has not always been as dire as now. And many of them decriminalize LGBTI relations, but also gender expression. But they've always been to different degrees. And what is bothersome about now is the fact that all of us, not all of a sudden, but it seems like all of a sudden, new policies are being made, laws are being amended, laws that were never really used because they were colonial laws. And that's another point that we should also like really be aware of, that like their colonial laws, their colonial propositions. Many in Ghana, for instance, even though from our 1992 constitution, which is what we currently use, same-sex relations are decriminalized, no, are criminalized, sorry. This was not really something that was used as much. If anything at all, it just allowed for social lynching and homophobia to occur, but it wasn't a law that was constantly being cited or being used against people. And then now we have this, which is a regression, right? It's a regression. You don't expect that countries that have had democracy or who say they've had democracy, who signed onto all these conventions, UN conventions, we are first in line, ECOWAS convention, first in line, will in 2024 pass or attempt to pass certain laws. And it's not just in Ghana. Nigeria in 2014 had a similar law that was passed, and this was 2014. But then last year, or I think 2022, they are attempting to amend that bill to more than just criminalize same-sexual relations, to also criminalize gender expression. And that's another point I also really want us to note, because whenever, and I think this is what Abena was referring to when she said that oftentimes when we think of LGBTI people, we are thinking of sex and sexual relations. It's more than that. It's whole lifestyles, it's whole identities, it's whole expressions. It's women Is football women not being allowed to join the national football team because they look masculine? That's what these bills do, right? It is young boys in primary school, senior high school, being bullied and being pulled out of school because they present more effeminate than their mates do. That's not something they can control. These are hormonal things. These are biological. And so when we have bills and policies that are being enacted now, which is regressing all of our general humanity, it doesn't become an issue of religion or an issue of personal stance or morality, because like we've also very rightfully mentioned in this call, a lot of laws should be about rehabilitation, should be about assisting someone to be at a better place, but should not, and that example, like the statements I'm making, that is not even the same thing in this particular instance, because these, when it comes to like anti-LGBT bills or just LGBT experiences, it shouldn't be anything that should be criminalized in the first place to start with, because these are people living their lives. These are people expressing themselves one way or another. And by constantly or deliberately, either way, going out of our ways to enact new bills or to increase the penalties on existing bills or existing laws to further criminalize people, that does not help anybody in the long run, especially if you live in Ghana, where our current bill is so far reaching and so burdensome. So what can we do about it? The nicest answer to this question is to say that make sure the bill doesn't get passed. But that's not very easy. Again, all oppression is connected. In Ghana, and this is very mind-blowing to me because our president is a human rights lawyer, but since his very first term, he's been doing so many things, so many policies, so many, he's been signing so many, allowing so many things to happen that have constantly infringed on our rights to protest, or our rights to organize, or our rights to express any kind of discomfort with the way the country is being run. So in Ghana, for instance, we can't protest anything. We can't protest high electricity tariffs. We can't protest unfair drug laws. We definitely can't protest LGBTI laws as well. It's not because we literally can't go on the streets, but it's because the systems that have been put in place make it so difficult for us to attempt to express any kind of discomfort with the way things are being run. But there is but it is in that a lot of movements can be made, or a lot of change can be made, which is why it's very important that when we have, first off, it's very important that we have calls like this that are trans-regional, that cut across countries, so that other people in other countries are aware of the realities in all of our respective countries, because it's not just a Ghanaian thing. Anti-LGBT laws, one got passed in Uganda. The Francophone countries are also going through a similar crisis, but at a varying rate. But by having conversations like this that cut across regions, that cut across even just like regions in one country, we are able to share our experiences. We're also able to find solidarity, right? So through calls like this, then people that are outside of Ghana can do the work that we in Ghana might not be able to do, like protesting, like writing letters, like positioning the president or the MPs and stuff like that. And that's like one thing that we can, that's more than one thing, but then that's something that we can do. But then the more practical ways of fighting anti-gender and anti-LGBT bills and rhetoric, because again, it's separate things. And before I even go into like the other thing we can do is to talk about how just like Ghanaian laws and Ghanaian policies, and I suppose West African and African policies work, which is the fact that a lot of the time we pass bills, but they don't really take effect. We have bills that says that every district should have a community health post, but there's no health practitioners there. We have policies that are passed all the time that say that there should be enough beds, but then that doesn't happen. So some people feel like it's just a bill, it doesn't matter. But the reasons why it's very important to nip it in the bud or still address it anyways is that what bills and what laws do is that they provide state backing to social behavior. That's where you have people being lynched. That's where you have people being denied jobs. That's where you're having people being kicked out of their houses. Because again, this are particular, we're using the Ghanaian bill as like a basis for conversation. The Ghanaian bill also says that landlords are not allowed to rent their houses to people they suspect of engaging in any form of homosexuality, or gender diverseness. And again, the Ghanaian bill is very, very wide-ranging. It's not just about same-sex relationships or same-sex relations. It's also about gender expression, and it forces or imposes corrective therapy on people who might not need it at all. So how do we fix things like this? Is by having these conversations. And basically at this point, I'll just stop because I'll be repeating everything that I've been said. By educating ourselves, because we can't expect to educate people if we don't do the work of learning what people's experiences are. And when we say learn, or we say educate yourselves, we don't mean like go on Google. Google is good, but you need to be very aware of the sources you are learning from. You need to be learning from people that are living the experiences that you are claiming to protect or claiming to support or fight for. You need to listen to queer people themselves. You need to listen to gender diverse people. We need to add them into our spaces and ask them how they feel about things. Ask them ask them what kind of help they need. And this is something I'm sure most of you are very familiar with because you've been working with like drug response. And when you're dealing with someone who uses drugs, you don't get up and say, you need this form of therapy or you need this form of solution. You need to talk with the people so they can see the kind of support that they need. And where people are saying that we need you to listen to us, we need you to educate yourself so that you can educate other people. But we also need you to speak up when people are saying bad things or wrong things, or people are being homophobic and are being violent. Because that's another thing that's very common in Ghanaian social culture and African culture, where we like to like mind our own business. So when we're in the marketplace and a young person is being accosted because they look a certain way, instead of us to like try and stop things, we'll just watch it happen. We don't ask why. I suppose my last bit on all of this is that we should ask why, right? Ask why do we feel the way we do about things? Ask why certain MPs are pushing some bills with all the strength in their hearts. Like, why are they so concerned? Why is it that this person is working the way they are working? Why is it that this person is being beaten in the marketplace? Why is it that this child has been bullied at school? And then we don't just ask why, but we take action about it as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michaela, for that wonderful submission. I mean, the question, I mean, the answers will keep on coming, and then we end up discussing the whole topic on its own. So now, I mean, the next question would have to do, I mean, it cuts across the LGBTQI community, the drug use community, and then the sex work community. In terms of inclusion, when it comes to decision making, Abna and Michaela and then other colleagues who are here, I mean, this has to do with drug use and then LGBTQ and sex work. When it comes to decision making, has there been improvement in terms of engagement? When, for instance, using Ghana's law as an example, do they consider stakeholders? Have stakeholders been consulted enough to have the right things being put in a policy? I mean, a state or a nation that does not have rules and regulations cannot actually survive, we say. But then, was there any consultation that were done into details that we have this bill that we have now? Michaela first before Abna, and then other colleagues.
Yeah, the question has like made me remember and laugh. Technically, like if you look, because you mentioned that we're using the Ghanaian bill as like a basis of conversation. When you look at the processes the bill went through, then yes, stakeholders were invited to speak about it. But when you look at what happened, like if you look at what actually happened, the realities on the ground, then no, stakeholders were not asked, they were not listened to. When queer people wrote petitions and even went to like the courtrooms to read them out, they were not allowed to. And that's not a very easy thing to do because 3 years ago, when the bill first got introduced, there was a first wave of homophobia. People were getting attacked. It's not very easy to write about your life and about the violence that you go through and then go into a room full of people that do not want your welfare or that do not want good for you, where cameras are there to say your truth. And when, as state institutions, you are passing laws and you don't make allocations for these sorts of things, then you're not being inclusive, you're not being accessible, because you need to understand that the people whose opinions you say you want to hear have different needs than everybody else. You need to take that into account. So if you don't take that into account, if you don't make provisions to secure the people that are coming to speak, if you don't make provisions to make sure that the stories that you claim you want to hear are getting to you untampered with, are remaining with your offices in confidentiality and with all the right processes, then you're not being true to the democratic processes you are claiming to be observing or you are claiming to like be representing. So technically, yes, that process was there. In the beginning parts of the bill, they invited for stakeholders to come and say how they felt about the bill, how it affects them. Also, I think it's very worthy to note that the current bill that has been passed has gone through many versions. And some of the changes that have been made to it are because queer people and allies and Ghanaians who realize that this bill is a very, forgive my words, a stupid bill, stood up and put their feet down. But then the people that wanted the bill to be passed, and again, I asked the question, why? Why are they so concerned about reinstating laws that existed 60, 100 years ago, whom the people that brought those laws to us do no longer use those laws, no longer hold on to those laws and those policies, right? Because like Abena was saying, I know this call is a very diverse call, so we might not have like picked up on some of the examples that she gave, but she was giving examples of like pre-colonial, not even pre-colonial is too far, but of indigenous Ghanaian cultures where same-sex relationships and gender diverse expressions have been identified, documented, and still exist. Because even in the language that Ghanaians use now, in almost all of the ethnic tribes, in all of our languages, third genders or neutral genders have always existed. Something that is just there, which is because the people to whom these words refer exist, right?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
yeah, that's it for right now.
All right. Thank you. Abena, do you have anything to add? And colleagues in here also, we have our colleagues from Nigeria, Burkina Faso, Ivory Coast. If you also have anything to share, I mean, processes in terms of enacting laws in all diverse community, the drug use community, are we being enough? Like the consultation, are consultations being done enough?
Like
Hello,
my
Abena, you have the floor.
said. Oh.
Yeah, you have the floor. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Like Michaela said,
hello, Abena.
Okay, so do I go ahead or do I wait for you to repeat the question for her?
No, kindly go ahead.
Okay, like Michaela said, the processes were there, but the reality was that it was just a formality. If you have a country as homophobic as ours and a continent, you know, I mean, a sub-region that's as homophobic as ours, it's not surprising that these processes were just a formality. And let's remember that this bill is a private member's bill. It's not something that the government itself decided to do. It's a private member's bill. So it ideally shouldn't have garnered the kind of support it did and also moved as fast as it did and become as powerful as it has become. But it has, because of how homophobic our society is. And so this obviously influences even democratic processes or legislative processes, like how this bill got to where it got to now. Like Michaela said, there were consultations, allies. There is a very strong ally group called, is it the Big 18? I don't know what they haven't done. They've written petitions, they were in parliament, they engaged in, they were interviewed, like rigorous interviews, like all-day interviews in parliament. They've written petitions, they've even petitioned the government, the president himself, they've called on him. But, you know, like I said, these things are just formalities. They don't hold water. They just were done. It's like what is done to every minority group. The inclusion is not meaningful. It's kind of tokenism. We just want you there so we can say that you were present, but
You were present.
your views aren't taken into account. Even the changes that were made to the bill were like mostly last minute, when, you know, they're reading and some members of parliament, oh, let's caption this way, let's remove, you know, sentencing or imprisonment and replace it with community work. Even those weren't really accepted. They were just minor corrections that were made. The most important ones that really bothers on the well-being and the exercise of the right of queer people in Ghana were ignored. So in the bill now, not only queer people are liable to imprisonment or a fine, even service providers, like people like doctors, lawyers. If you provide a service, knowingly provide a service to a queer person without disclosing or reporting the person, you can go to prison. Advocates can go to prison. I mean, like, this bill affects basically every single person. And that is what is most scary about that. It doesn't just affect the queer community, it affects everybody. So it's generally an infringement on the right of every single Ghanaian. And I feel that that's a part that that has been largely ignored in conversations around this bill, because everybody thinks, oh, it's just queer people and, you know, they can just go to prison because, you know, we don't like them anyways. But we forget that this is a bill that affects everybody. And I'm not saying we should be interested in it because it affects us also. But, you know, like Michaela said earlier also, all oppressions are connected. And it's important that we take cognizance of this fact. And the bill isn't only contravening just our constitutional rights as Ghanaians, and also that of queer people. We are breaching, if this bill is passed, we are breaching both what do you call it, some continental
UN conventions, treaties,
conventions that we have ascribed to. And so yeah, every time I talk so much, I just realize that I'm talking too much and I should stop.
Okay.
But the crux of the issue is that these processes were just formalities. And I would just want to reiterate something Michaela said about us questioning why these people are doing what they are doing. They don't care about Ghanaian family values. They really don't care. They don't care about upholding whatever moral rights we have. They don't care about religious sentiment or religious dogmas. They are pushing their own agenda, which is, first of all, fueled by hatred. And also the same Western influence they are saying brought queerness, which is flawed in anyways, like I mentioned earlier, the queerness isn't a Western import, but their fight against the queer community is a Western import. There is an old video of Sam George talking about how people, you know, queer people have the rights to exist and da. So, you know, we should question how this same person made this sharp 360 turn to the point where he is, you know, championing the prosecution of people he spoke for just, you know, a few years ago. And we all know that they are being funded by an international I call them hate group, because if you're a group whose main focus is, fueling hatred against minoritized people, like queer people, like women generally who want to access abortion services, this group has, and they're not just doing this in Ghana, they've been in Kenya. There was a lot of chaos in Kenya because they are actively fighting against access to productive health care. Mainly abortion services. They have caused chaos in other African countries, and they've come to Ghana, and they are starting with the queer community. And again, they are not ending there. They are going to go after our right to reproductive health care. They are going to go after a whole lot of communities. And so we should remember again that all operations are connected, and really question the motives of people who have decided to take it upon themselves to fuel such hatred against members of their own society who have not in any way wronged anyone.
Okay. Thank you very much. I saw Michaela's hand up, but before she speaks, if anyone also has a contribution or probably questions, the floor is open. The floor is open. So if you have any questions, any comments, before we move, we would have to look at the other community, that's the sex work. I mean, the implications of laws, and then also some of the good things that are being done in other countries, which is helping that countries in West African region could also adopt and then make a living standard for people who use drugs, LGBTQI community, and sex works, the well-being of their life and their human rights. Okay, Ivy, you have the floor.
Hi again. So like to just take up where Michaela ended, or somewhere what she said, the why question is very, very important, right? I've been taking this whole bill into a lot of consideration, and the fact that this bill has been in the making for like 2 or more years, but then they find it difficult to address some of the very, very, very bad living conditions of Ghanaians. It's really, really, really up. Like, why would we put, well, I mean, these are grown-up people who should know what a priority is. Why would you make someone's sexuality a priority? Why should it be? Like, why should this even be up for discussion? It's like saying women having the right to abortion should be up for discussion. How do you get to choose if you don't have a womb? How? Being queer, I think, it's kind of not seen as an African value because of colonization again. And we've been so whitewashed that we think we're trying to run away from Western culture, but we're just walking straight into it. Because, as they say, Western people influence queer people. And, Western people influence queer people to be queer right now. But they're being founded by Westerners. Make it make sense. How do you get funding from people who are influencing people to be queer, but then them giving you your money there, you don't think some of these issues should not be even up for discussion, because like it doesn't for people who it doesn't affect you shouldn't have a right to make laws on things that do not affect you. They should do things that actually help put the country in a better place. We are crippling in the economy, is like it's dying, it has no legs to run on. And the one thing that they find important to approach is queer people living their lives. That is the most important thing to them. And the fact that this bill has been in the making for 2 years and they sought to like see it through, you know that they could do better if they wanted to do better. But who's holding them accountable? No one. Because the people in general people like Joseph in general do not actually want to read. I'm sure they don't know what's in the bill, because once this bill is passed, every single, like, it's like the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida. But people think because it's a anti-LGBTQ bill, it's only against queer people. I feel like there should be more education, like widespread education on what's actually in the bill. And Ghanaians should be forced to read what is, like, they should be pushed, not forced, but pushed to read what's in the bill, so they know the people we've put our faith into, like the multiple grown-up people in parliament that we've put our economy and our country in the hands of, and they want to force the president to sign what? Like,
Okay,
but anyway,
thank you,
like
Ivy. Okay.
I'm not actually done. Let me, can I land?
Okay.
The end of what I'm saying is, things like this should not be up for discussion from people who know nothing or know very little about these like things. They are just, this bill is very close-minded, and like a lot of research was not put into it. It's literally, I don't want to say it holds no water or stupid, because like that's like a bit of a stretch, but it is. Thank you, I'm done.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I'll come back to participants, colleagues here for further question, but we have to quickly look at sex work, because we are looking at 3 communities. So we have to also look at the fact sheet. I mean, these 3 communities are connected in one way or the other. When it comes to people who use drugs, I mean, the LGBTQI community, one way or the other, when there are health issues set in, there are some drugs that they do not get. And for instance, if they require certain drugs because they are illegal or probably they are not allowed in the country, they do not get it. Sex workers, when they also face issue, I mean, the distribution of condom is also one of the issues that they also face. So quickly for us to look at them, because we are behind time, for us to look at the fact sheet of the sex work community in West Africa. I mean, sex work in general in West Africa, I mean, the legal status of it is different. It varies. I mean, it is frequently common in practice, where partially driven by a whole lot of factors, which will not be mentioned or can be mentioned. I mean, there are these factors also that also leads to HIV/AIDS, and then so on and so forth. So, I mean, looking at the countries in West Africa, where the status of it in each West Africa, in Benin, it is legal. I mean, but related activities such as brothel, I mean, when we talk about brothel, it's more or less like a guest house, but then it's being used for people, sex workers, for their customers and other stuff. But there are other related activities that are illegal. Now, when you come to Burkina Faso, I mean, it is not specifically prohibited by law, but I mean, soliciting and pimping are illegal. In Cape Verde, it is legal, but there are no laws that is binding it. There are no particular law actually that is binding it. Now, when we come to Cote d'Ivoire, I mean, sex work itself is legal, but associated activities such as soliciting, pandering, and then running hotels are illegal. So you realize that the condition in each West African countries varies. When you come to Gambia and Liberia, it is actually widespread, but it's illegal. You get to see people doing it, but it's illegal in Gambia and Liberia. Now, when you come to Ghana sex work is illegal, but it is widespread. It's widespread so much that, I mean, many Ghanaians are unaware that it's actually prohibited. I mean, it's actually something that goes on. You see lots of people on the street doing it, but then because of this, people do not really see it as something that is being prohibited, or because, I mean, some of these things are not guided by law. And then when you come to Mauritania and Guinea, it's also illegal. When we come to Guinea-Bissau is also, I mean, it's common, and there are no laws that is binding it. I mean, sex work in Mali is legal, but as said, third-party activities such as procuring are illegal. And when you come to Niger is also illegal, but it's common in most of the cities. where near mines and around military bases, it's actually common there. Now, when we look at Nigeria as a whole, sex work in Nigeria is illegal in all northern states that practice it, that practice the Islamic penal code. It's illegal. In the southern Nigeria, activities of paying madams, underage sex work, and other operations or ownership of brothels are penalized. There is actually a law that guides it. So under the sections 223, 224, and 225 of the Nigeria Criminal Code. Even though Nigeria laws does not legalize commercial sex work, it is verged if such work is performed by an independent individual who operates on their own accord without the use of pimps or a brothel. Now, when we look at sex work in also Sierra Leone, Sierra Leone is legal, and soliciting and third-party involvement are prohibited. They are being prohibited by the Sexual Offences Act 2012. There is an act that actually prohibits soliciting and third-party involvement. Sex work in Togo is legal and then it's common. Related activity. In this case, using legal means that there are times where there are no laws that are binding it. People do it freely without any penalty. And living off the earning of sex work and procuring are prohibited. So punishment is up to 10 years imprisonment for minor or violence. When minor violence or these minors or violence is involved, you are being sent to jail for 10 years. Now, when we look at Senegal for quite a long time, for a very long time, has a very open environment for sex work. What happens is that sex workers must be at least 21 years of age and has to register with the police. And they need to also carry a valid sanitary card, and then they also have to test negative and when it comes to sexually transmitted infections. So according to research or in practice, Senegal is one of the countries, the only country in Africa that has legalized sex work and also regulates it. They also, they give them medical checkup and then can also present up-to-date medical report cards to the police request according to, they have a law, or they have under the Senegal Penal Code, that's Article 318 to 327, that gives them, it's actually legalized it and regulated. Now, in the case of Senegal, when it comes to the case of Senegal, female sex workers, because of the registration, the potential to limit HIV acquisition and transmission, the current issue, it's kind of low, because before you even engage in this kind of activity, you need to have a very good record before you are able to venture into it. And then studies have also shown that several policy changes can potentially increase female sex workers' registration rates and improve their well-being without overturning the law. For example, the registration proof to a QR code. They have a QR code, including psychosocial support in the registration support package. All these things increase benefit of registration. In addition, integrating registered female sex workers mandatory sexual health appointment with maternal health appointment. All these things, they do all these things to help them, training, and then a few other things that they do. So now, when there is no laws, or there are unfavorable laws that bind this sex work community, there are so many that goes wrong that we do not really pay much attention to. Stigma, discrimination, and punitive legal and social environment are key determinants of increase in HIV/AIDS vulnerability, which is no doubt. I mean, it is not surprising that the global HIV burden among female sex workers is an estimate of 30 times higher than among all women, according to UNAIDS estimates. I mean, for sex workers who also inject drugs or who also use drugs, a lack of non-stigmatizing needle and syringe exchange and treatment programs also adds to the burden of common HIV comorbidities, and such as hepatitis B and then C. So if there are laws that are unfavorable, condom distribution and all those things are not there, it really affects this community. Sex workers are also at a greater risk, for poor mental health, social exclusion, and violence, including feminicide. A true common cause of death for sex workers. Faced with these health risks, there's a need, calling on authorities, there's a need for us to support the health and lives of people who sex workers. Lastly, the criminalization of sex work and repression police practice affect all aspects of health. For sex workers, these things are common in most of the three communities. In the LGBTI community, it is there. In the drug community, it is even worse, where people are being arrested anyhow and are being taken to jail. So when there are unfavorable laws, these are some of the implications that it has on our community. So coming back to participants, this is a fact sheet. We realize that in most of the West African countries, there are no much laws that are binding them in terms of their activities. But as advocates, what we would want to advocate for is that the government or probably agencies that are responsible add these people to a policy where they have regular access to health items like condom and then all those things. And then we also look at the other side. There is this practice in most of West African countries where police arrest these sex workers, they detain them, they take all their money, or there are times where there's exchange of sex for their release and all those things. Because sex work is not being regulated, the increase of HIV is really more, and we have to look at that from a public health perspective. So that is all on the sex work. The floor is open. If anyone has a comment or questions, the floor is open.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
My name is Ekeju Fine. I'm the AD Sisters Ability and Rights Support Initiative, a sex worker-led organization in Rivers State, Port Harcourt, Nigeria. And I'm a member of Nigerian Workers Association.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity. I must appreciate that it's not everyone that will make out from their busy schedule to, come and discuss issues affecting the KPs at large. I'm so grateful for this opportunity. Now, we want to talk about sex work in Nigeria, because here is where I am. There is where I do my sex work activities. Over time, the government have overlooked so many things and so many issues affecting sex work in Nigeria. Just like you mentioned in section 222, 223, 224, I think 225 as well, where it's clearly stated that sex work is not illegal. But people who gained from sex work activities, like the pimps, the madams, or whosoever that gains from it, it's illegal. And they talked about underage prostitution as well. But the truth of the matter is that, including us that are an adult, we face so many challenges. We see so many things, violation of human rights, illegal detention, and all of that. I was a victim when I was in a brothel where immigration or custom came to a brothel with the information that some foreigners are in that brothel. And they harassed all of us, take a video of all of us, even when we identified as Nigerians, and start demanding money from us. That if you refuse to pay money, the video will go viral and the world will know what you're doing for a living. I cried, I shed tears. Nobody was there to speak for us, even including the hotel management. And that is why I took it upon myself that I will remain to advocate for the rights and well-being of sex workers in Nigeria. With the help of my Madam Amake Nemo, our national coordinator, Nigerian Sex Workers Association. We see a lot of things happening. To talk about people who use drugs, it's cut across all typology. In fact, I will boldly tell you that at least 70% of sex workers use drugs because of the number of customers we entertain on a daily basis. Someone with a clear eye can. For you to satisfy your customer, you must be on something. But the way the police is taking it, I'm not even sure. I am not sure if some of our policemen, our law enforcement agencies are aware of our law. Because the way they do it, they get you with a condom, they said it is an exhibit. They get you arrested, flog the hell out of you, detain you illegally, and it has been happening. So I must say something. We've been doing a whole lot to see that these things normalize, to see that things are being in order. But we need a support system. We need supporting hands. We need people. We need funders. Like I attended a training one time and they were saying if you have any suggestion. And I suggested something. If it will be possible for us, as we've been doing advocacy work and it's been yielding fruit, if we can still go on and advocate for our governments in different countries to include AP programming in law enforcement agency syllabus, it will go a very long way for us. Thank
you. Thank you very much for the wonderful comment and submission. I mean, that is well noted, and then it's really helpful. I mean, the Nigerian Sex Work Association is part of this project that we're doing. We have other partners in Burkina Faso and then also Nigeria. So we are really grateful for you joining to actually share your experience on this.
Yeah, sorry, can I also add?
Yes, please. Yeah, is it Michaela?
Oh, no, this is Uzoma Kelechi. I'm a Nigerian.
Okay, kindly add. Then Michaela will come. Thank you.
Uzoma Kelechi. I work for Peace and Security Network, Rivers State, Nigeria. Okay, I'm the speaker that just finished speaking. I just needed to add some things because everything she said is typical of what we see here in Nigeria when it comes to sex workers. You know, the truth is that here in Nigeria, they don't even regard them. They don't see them as anything. The way they stigmatize them is like it breaks someone's heart. You know, see the way they stigmatize these sex workers and all that. You'll be wondering, are they not humans like us? Are they not from Nigeria? Are they not part of the society? Are they not part of the community? Don't they have the same rights, you know, as those that are stigmatizing them and all that? You know, the stigmatization is too much. And that's one thing, I don't know how we can help. I don't know how we can come in, but that is one area I think we should look at. Stigmatization is really, really, really on the rise here in Nigeria. They don't see them as anything. This one, Ashawo, you know, the kind of names they even call them, it's pathetic. And my heart bleeds each time I see, you know, people condemn this set of humans as though they are no human beings. You understand? I think we Nigerians should start knowing that everybody in Nigeria has the same rights. Nobody has more rights than the other. So you don't have any right to call another person names and all that. Then for our police force, I don't think they know the laws so much. I don't think they understand anything about human rights. You know, they could just go into a hotel and invade the hotel and they will arrest all the ladies there. What did they do? Nothing. I mean, these people are trying to, you know, fend for themselves, trying to survive with what they're doing, and you're going to arrest them and all that. I mean, illegally. So they don't even understand what their human rights are. So the police force in Nigeria needs to be trained to understand that humans had certain rights that are very natural with them, and nobody can take that out from them or away from them. So I think we really need, you know, a lot to do here in Nigeria. I mean, we have to do a lot here in Nigeria. That just to add to what she has said. Everything she said, it's very correct. Very correct. Very correct. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I think it's cut across all the region. I mean, Liberia, we come to Ghana. So I think your suggestions are well noted and they are really on point. I mean, education is one of the things. I mean, there's a lot of misconception out there that we need to actually work as an advocate to address, but we would also need, I mean, law enforcement and others also to mature up, make sure we are doing the right thing, because there are laws, but it looks like they do not really know the laws. So I will take Bright, and then Michaela will come in. So Bright, you have the floor.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I just wanted to say, sorry, I cut you, Bright. I wanted to say that I think it's really cool that both Fine and Kelechi spoke about what it's like in Nigeria. I wanted to add that it's very similar in Ghana as well. Even though in the beginning, Michael was talking about how in Ghana it's like we turn a blind eye to it, and there's lots of people on the street. The police are still very violent sometimes, and it's very targeted, right? Because they see you on a normal day, they know this is what you are doing, but there's some all of a sudden they want to do a raid. It's like, why are you doing a raid? And the raid they're doing, they're not doing it because of they have any proper intel. They're just trying to be violent. Lots of sex workers suffer rape at the hands of like the police. I also wanted to add that something that's also very like it's I don't think it's only Ghana. I'm sure people have similar experiences, but then there's also a huge stigma around sex work and sex workers like on the regular, and so it affects how you access healthcare. It affects how you access basic necessities like even in the transportation. If people are in the transportation and then the conductors or the church mates, they think that you're a sex worker or you look a certain way, they will treat you differently. They will be verbally abusive to you. They can even be physically abusive to you, and that's not right or cool at all. That's it.
Hello.
Thank you. Yeah, right. You have the floor now.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dr. Bright from the Indomitable Youth Organization, operating from Benin City, Edo State. I actually appreciate the presentations and the various areas that we've actually talked about. Though I dropped a question on like a comment on the chat box, like how do we actually draw the line, considering that when we preach about substance or drug abuse, we use some kind of terminologies in that. Even when either socially, culturally, or religiously talk about the LGBTQ, they use some form of derogatory languages. The same thing also goes with the sex workers. You now realize that when we are going for advocacy, the people we are advocating to, they are either having one social, cultural, or even religious bias. So we still have the challenge of drawing a line between that. Consider that those of us who are advocating, sometimes we are also at risk of being harmed. However, the advocacy will continue because nobody should be treated as not a human, irrespective of whatever the person is or whatever the person chooses to be. Now, in the part of advocacy, I actually feel there is a need for us to balance up this thing because I've had calls to engage law enforcement agents and some other persons. I actually operate from the area of HIV/AIDS prevention, and because we know the role of this key population in controlling the spread of HIV and AIDS, we have to kind of reach them. Now, I'll give a particular story. I've had to go to the station to secure bail for about 5 men who have sex with men in Benin City. And when I got to the station, the first comment from those at the counter was, "Oh, this is their boss. He has come." You know, by the time I eventually met with the DPU and the officers that arrested them, questioning and other thing revealed that they did not actually arrest them because they were MSM, you know, because they saw some other things that were kind of incriminating in them that made them to, and the way they were acting towards the policemen, and the policemen felt, oh, you feel you have your own power, we have our own power. And by the time they kind of harassed them, they realized that some of them were wearing, the males were wearing female pants. So that one now proved their curiosity. But for me to be able to secure their bail, because of the laws of the land, I didn't have to go through whether they were MSM, actually have to go through the health aspect that they were going for their treatment, and that was how they were accosted. And of course, that was the area through which I was able to secure their bail. And I was shocked that the policemen they tore the case notes and they didn't even ask for money for bail from me. It was me that even volunteered to give them transport. So coming back, I need to say that there is need in doing our advocacy. We also need to educate the community that we are dealing with. I've also had calls to interaction with the police, and I said, if a brothel is paying tax and government is collecting tax from these people, why would they come start disturbing those inside the brothel? And the policeman said, the truth of the matter is that what they are going for is that they see that some of these brothels, the guests harbors criminals, they help criminals to keep their weapons as well. So sometimes when they get information, they come in to raid. And of course, some people will misbehave in that regard. And they now also take advantage of the ladies, because some of the ladies, they have kind of pseudonyms. They have pseudonyms which are not their real names. So they kind of harass them in the name of impersonation and some other things. But generally, when you look at the community members, they have hotspots. And in some of these hotspots, you see some criminal activities taking place in that place. So what we can also do as we advocate is for us to also educate community members, even though the challenge of trying to draw the boundary of community members is gradually increasing, as in we can actually draw a line to put community members together. But we must also go on that path of educating the community members so that they may not hold a community member for another offense and you say, oh, they are treating me because I'm a lesbian or because I'm MSM or because I'm a drug user or because I'm a sex worker. We also need to educate them on how they will conduct themselves in so many things, because whether I like it or not, from this information, we realize that the laws and the law enforcement agents, they are not friendly. I don't want to talk about Nigeria where everybody wants to use every opportunity they have, where the law enforcement get to extort money from people. So understanding this particular terrain, we need to educate community members on how their conduct would be, where they will be, and how they will behave themselves when they are in certain locations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bright. The
Hello.
suggestions and comments are really, really appreciated. Okay, I heard
Hello.
hello. Yes, please, you
Yeah,
have the floor.
it's coming from fine. I thank Dr. Bright for the observations he made. But truth be told, the law enforcement, yes, we know that some brothels or some hotspots have issues of criminality and whatsoever. But the truth of the matter is this: the law enforcement agency comes into brothel to raid, sometimes not because of any criminal activity going on, but they stand on that ground to visit brothels in the name of getting an information. If not for anything, I've been witness to so many issues like this, and it turned out that there was no information given to them. Okay, for example, I was in a brothel and we pay on a weekly basis police money. There's a particular money we sex workers pay. We call it police money. We pay security fees. We pay a waste bin fee. If the brothel manager or the brothel owner's girlfriend or wife is celebrating birthday, we pay money. If you refuse to pay these funds, your door will be locked. And over the time, I made an observation that some of the raids the police are coming to brothels to raid, they didn't just come there. Someone initiated it. And I made my findings. And I found out that the brothel owners are actually working with law enforcement agencies, giving them information on when to come to raid the girls. The brothel owner or the manager or the brothel share lady comes to the station where we are being arrested and detained to tell us that the police is requesting for social amount for each person's bail. Are you ready? Should we pay? And they will give you how many days to refund that money. And after everything, they go back to the station or wherever and divide the money with the law enforcement agencies. It has been happening, not just once, not twice. I experienced it, if nothing like less than 3 times. Even at a point, I had to leave the brothel I was and went to another brothel close to that place. And I was made the share lady of the brothel. That was when I found out, when I started having issues with the brothel owner, me as the chair lady, when he was coming up with such ideas on when the police will come raiding, and I refused. So, but whenever they comes, they give you this idea, idea of criminal activities going on. My dear, I can stand my ground and say it boldly that there is nothing of such. Okay, there was a time they came and they were matching all our doors down. I was with a customer in my room and they brought us out naked. Extorted money from my customer, asked me to pay some money, and one of the policemen asked me to have sex with him or else they would take me to the station. I had to do it for my bail because then I've not started advocating. In fact, I don't even know my rights. I felt if I don't do this, I will remain in cell. They said the next day they will take us to court. I had to do it for bail, which is rape.
Wow.
So whatever I'm saying here is not just because I heard it from people, but because I have witnessed it, I experienced it. And it's wrong.
Wow.
It's really wrong. They are not doing us any good. And that is why you see some girls are not bold enough to come out and say they sell sex at work.
Very true.
So many girls are indoors doing their sex work activities, knowingly or unknowingly, to their families, or whosoever, because they don't want to be harassed. And that is why you see people killing people for rituals. Because when you're hiding, doing your work, you're not safe. But if you're bold enough to speak out and say, this is what you do, people knows it. If you're going out, you'll be able to tell somebody, if not anybody, your neighbor, look at where I'm going to in case if anything happens. But people go out secretly to do their work and end up dying. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you very much for this wonderful experience. I mean, there are so many stories, or there are so many experiences. I mean, during the first phase of this project, I mean, there are some interesting stories in there that, I mean, confirm whatever you are saying. I mean, it's very, very true. I mean, it happens in all the three communities that we are actually discussing today. I mean, it happens in the drug communities, where even you find some law enforcement personnel. I mean, that is their get. So in Ghana here, we call those places ghetto. I mean, they go in there, do whatever they have to do, but at the end of the day, they come back to arrest them and extort money from them. I mean, it happens. It's something that continue going on. And I mean, because of this public harassment and stigma, sometimes you hardly get people to come out to speak, which is why almost all these things are going on, because at the mention of sex work, religious factors comes in, where so there are times where me as a person, I ask myself, if it were to be my sister that is being treated as such, I mean, will I be happy? So, I mean, there are so many experiences that if we would want to share, I mean, the time that what we have here would not be able to cover all the topics. Abina, if the floor is yours, if you have any contribution to make.
Yeah, thank you so much. I just wanted to mention that so there are two issues that haven't been mentioned, and I just wanted to mention. I don't know why I'm trying to be political about this.
Oh no, I mean, go ahead.
The first one is how very gendered law enforcement approaches and even society's approaches to viewing sex work is. So when we talk about sex work, everybody's attention immediately goes to women.
Yeah, true.
Meanwhile, there are men who are sex workers, and they even do it more blatantly. When law enforcement set out to arrest sex workers, they are targeting women. Aside the fact that there are men who are sex workers, there are a lot more women, female sex workers, but we forget that they don't have sex with themselves. They are having sex with men. When law enforcement when they do that, they are random arresting. In the law, I mean, I don't know about Nigeria, but in Ghana, sex work is a crime also for the person soliciting the service, not just for the person, selling the sex. But when they go to arrest sex workers, they don't arrest the men who are also breaking the law per the Constitution. They only arrest the women. So it's important to notice that it's the law has a very sexist, the implementation of the law takes a very sexist approach. It's very gendered. The target is always the women, not the men who are also committing a crime by soliciting sex, not the men who are pimps, because most of the pimps are men. not the men who are pimps, because pimping is also a crime per the Constitution. So when we do advocacy, you know, for sex work, we should consider this very important aspects of it. The second thing I wanted to say about sex work is how we are, I mean, especially for those of us in the development sector, NGO sector, our quickest approach is trying to get them an alternative livelihood. And this is because we haven't come to accept that sex work is work. Your solution for somebody doing sex work shouldn't be, you know, in quotes, getting them a better job. Sex work is work. If we go beyond our cultural and, you know, religious or whatever morality we attach to our understanding of sex work and see it as something that is demonic, something that is wrong, something that is, you know, rotten society, we will get, you know, to the understanding that sex work is work. And instead of trying to get sex workers to stop doing it and find different things to do, we should rather decriminalize and regulate it like Senegal does. If it's well regulated, sex workers will feel safe. They are, you know, you mentioned in your presentation that they are at a high risk of contracting HIV. And this is because it's not regulated. The sex workers themselves are not, you know, they don't get routine medical checkup because they cannot even go to the hospital and say, I'm a sex worker. You know, the doctor or the midwife or whoever will raise their noses at them and roll their eyes at them. So there is that, you know, stigma. So they don't even go. And also their situation usually progresses to AIDS quickly because they don't do routine checkups. A lot of them don't. So before they realize they have HIV, it's already, you know, progressed to AIDS and there's nothing that can be done for them. Because it's also not regulated, a lot of these abuses that happen, you know, to them, unfortunately, go unaddressed. From their customers to law enforcement who are supposed to, you know, be protecting them, to random citizens who think because someone is a sex worker, a woman is a sex worker, they can just abuse her and nothing can be done about it. And that really happens. When journalists or news outlets are reporting news on you know, on the abuse or the murder of sex workers. And I like that you mentioned that they are at a very high risk of femicide. And that happens a lot. And when this is being reported in the news, the main thing is that she's a sex worker. And they make it look like because she's a sex worker, her death is irrelevant. So you're reporting news, a woman has been murdered in blah, 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 blah. They will say a prostitute was murdered and she had gone to sell sex, and they will make it look like because she's a sex worker, her death is justified. So I think that when we are doing our advocacy, I don't know if your organization trains journalists, but there should be, you know, if you are not, that's something that you should consider about, you know, minority sensitive reporting. When you're reporting on issues like, you know, queer issues, sex worker issues, you know, people who use drugs issues, they should have the proper language to report some of these issues. And also as a society, we should come to accept sex work as work. And you know, I mean, if we come to that understanding, it will also inform our advocacy. There are people working in organizations, you know, that are supposed to be advocating for sex workers who themselves don't believe in the right of sex workers to be sex workers. So they're only there because it's a job that pays them. So there isn't that, exactly. So there isn't that dedication to ensuring that this very discriminated against group, you know, gets, and in Ghana, we haven't, I don't know any organization that is loudly out there saying decriminalize sex work.
I mean, the conversation around it is always, people always shy away from it. I mean, there are times when even the work we do, when you mention sex work, they said, what are you advocating for sex workers? I mean, those kind of funny questions and all those things comes.
You see, exactly. So, and so because of that, a lot of the interventions they are like bandages. So instead of seeing this as a systemic issue that needs to be addressed, systematically, we are always looking at, okay, sex workers are, at high risk of HIV. Let's go and, educate them to go check their status, and also if they have HIV, to take the antiretroviral drugs. Okay, what alternative livelihoods can we provide to sex workers so that they don't rely on sex work? These are all bandages, and some of them are actually not even needed. What we need is to ensure that they don't face these challenges in the first place. So moving forward, I would say that this is the kind of lens we should put on issues around sex work.
All right. Thank you very much. I think we've actually exhausted our time and we've had an extra time. I'm really grateful for all of us being here to discuss this very important topic. I mean, I think that the next topic has to do with discrimination, discrimination and violence. So I think that would actually be considered as a part 2 of this, because there's a lot that we have to talk about that we have not been able to talk about. Thank you very much. To wrap it up, I think I would take final remarks from panelists. We have Prince here, we have Abina, and then we have Michaela here. So I would want Prince to give his final remarks, followed by Michaela, and then Abina will give her final remarks. Thank you. Okay, so I think in the absence of Prince, let's take a closer remark from Michaela.
Can I go now?
Yes,
general
please.
closing remarks.
Yes, general closing
I
remarks.
think first I want to say thank you to everybody that's on this call. That was like in the beginning and then managed to stay through to the end. I know we have very busy days, but then towards the end of the call, lots of insightful conversations came up. So anybody else able to like stay to the end, that's really, really cool. Thank you. Generally, I know we're talking about like 3 different communities, but then
Yeah.
all oppression is connected, and a lot of the things that these groups face are interconnected. There's also people, oftentimes, there's people at like intersections of drug use, sexual minorities, and of sex work. It's very, very, like, I think someone was saying earlier, Fine was saying earlier, a lot of sex workers use drugs as well. A lot of sex workers are also queer people. So there's always that intersection, and it's very good to be mindful about the intersections. So that when we are doing our respective advocacies, we don't like only think about one group of people, but then we talk about all of them. And then also when we meet opportunities or resources that might be more helpful to other persons in our communities that have these intersections, we are able to like point it out and know who to prioritize when we are giving out resources and stuff like that. Mostly because I was set to talk about like the bills and stuff like that. I think I want to leave this call with the fact that we should all ask the questions why, right? When we hear about bills being passed, when we hear about articles on the news and newspapers, we should ask ourselves, why is this particular news agency constantly reporting about queer people in this way? And what can I do? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michaela. So Prince is here. Prince, your final words.
All right, Mike. Thanks for the opportunity. On behalf of West Africa Drug Policy Network and members, we want to appreciate our panelists. We want to appreciate the participants and the contributions. I mean, one of my final statements will be to encourage people of these communities to have it, to show up, and to also articulate the issues. And it makes advocacy a bit more easier, because when we talk about inclusion, when we talk about representation, should an opportunity arise, have to, the doors are open for our participation and our inclusion, then it means we can make full contributions to policy formulation and practices around us that affect us. So the concept of nothing for us without us is what we are pushing and encouraging every member of this community to participate in conversations like this, so that people will really speak from the point of view of experience. And once you speak from that point of view, then it means whatever outcome of the engagement becomes very resourceful. But I must say that this engagement has been very instructive, it's been very informative, and I look forward to such engagement in the future. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Prince. We'll take final words from Abena.
Yeah, I would just like to add that I saw from the chat, it seems almost everyone here is representing an organization or another. What I would say is for us on our own part to be as inclusive as possible. So when you are organizing workshops, when you are organizing your forums, whichever, community DEBA, whichever activities, in your researches, whichever activities or programming you do, even if it's not sex worker or, queer people or people with disabilities centered, make a conscious effort to be inclusive. That's something my organization Yebetumi has been trying to do since last year. So when we organize workshops, we make sure that we invite, women with disabilities, we invite queer women, we invite sex workers. And, because they are not used to being in such spaces, our experience has been that sometimes they are reluctant to show up. But, we are going to keep pushing. So I would say that on your part, because at the national level, we haven't gotten there, it will take a lot of work to get there. But like I said, these issues are very systemic. And if we are going to address them, we should also be very systemic in our approaches. So let's start from us, our various organizations. Even if you're an individual activist, who organizes activities or does programming around issues of developmental interest, please do make a conscious effort to be more inclusive, bring them into the spaces. And like Prince said, they should talk, they should speak, they should share their issues. But if they are not brought into the spaces, they cannot share their experiences or their opinions or their views. And so make a conscious effort to bring them into the spaces. And when they come, also take their issues or their views very seriously. Make sure you are considering those issues. Make sure you are including them in your final document or your final outcome, whatever it is, be deliberately inclusive. That's what I'm saying.
All right, thank you very much, Abena. So colleagues, thank you also very much for joining, and then those who share their experiences and those who have also send their questions to the chat box and also send their contribution to the chat box. On behalf of the West Africa Drug Policy Network, and on behalf of our partners in Burkina Faso, Nigeria, and Ghana, and then on behalf of our panelists, Abena Binewa, Osu, Michaela, and then to our Executive Director, Prince Bulusuni, who has also been on this call to share his suggestion and an opinion. I would like to say thank you very much. The next webinar will be in April, so be on the watch out. I'll be sending the emails. Check on our social media outlets also. We'll be sharing them as we'll be having the webinar. If you want to get in touch with us, you can also get in touch via email, info@wadpn.org. We are there to help you with any issue. Thank you very much. Thank you, panelists, and thank you, participants, for joining. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.